Cross my heart and hope to fly. Stick a cupcake in my... Ah! Okay, when I said home, I was really thinking of something along the lines of chapel, or, even Star House specifically. I murmured as we trudged along the railroad towards Hoofington. From here, even the dark, rolling clouds over the city somehow looked darker and more rolling-y than the clouds elsewhere in the wasteland. Heck, even being teleported inside a chlorine-choked stable seemed more likely than to me. The 8 metal rails stretched as far ahead of us and behind us as we could see. Clearly, some pony had gone to great lengths to clear these tracks. The least pitted and rusted lengths of them all over the wasteland, it looked like, had been selected to repair a single line, and the ties that were too badly rotted had been replaced. The goddess will not risk any more of her children in that place, not until the enervation dilemma is resolved, Lacuna said softly. You know how multiple alicorns cause the renalization effect, and technically, we are within the old Equestrian territorial province of Hoofington. Technically, the goddess can kiss my dock, Rampage murmured as we passed a rusted switching station with a sign that read, Hoofington, 22 miles. Wine, 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 I said with a roll of my eyes. A few days in 10 pony and you all go soft. I didn't feel tired at all, though, of course, I was kind of cheating. Ponies is always whining, Rover agreed with a snort. What we really need is a form of transportation like little pips, P21 said. Glory lowered her eyes and he glanced over. Not necessarily a sky wagon, but some way to get around that doesn't involve all of us being worn out by walking. He stopped and looked speculatively at a simple little hoof cart sitting by a covered spur behind the switching station. He rubbed his chin. Hey, Scotch, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Scotch blinked at the hoof cart and then at the scrubland around us. I think so. P21, but where are we going to find a dozen rockets out here? P21 looked back at her flatly. What? The filly said defensively. A little bit later, Scotch had checked over the car and found it good to go. I smiled as they pushed it out and onto the repaired track. Well, I suppose it's an improvement, but now you're going to get all worn out working these levers. P21 looked at me, and then a small smile grew on his face. What? Glory glanced at me apologetically. Rampage grinned, and even Scotch was smirking. Why are you looking at me like that? I asked as I took a step back. What? You know, I'm supposed to be the hero leader thingy, I said as I trotted along. Little Pip's friends wouldn't make her do this. P21, it's making that whining noise again, Scotch Tape said as I hauled the hoof cart along the tracks, the wheels squealing softly despite the grease the filly had pumped into the bearings. In addition to the grease gun, P21 had found a dozen or so caps, some bits, and some scrap metal while searching the switch house and maintenance shed. Because it's a pony engine, Rover said with a snort. Well, work the reins a bit till it stops, the buck said as he lay back with his saddlebags pillowing his head. The filly slapped the ropes against my non-metallic ass, making me jump, blush, and glare back at my friends. See? Pretty responsive, actually. You all suck, I murmured darkly. It's just till we get to Hoofington, Glory assured me as we were rolling along. Then she rubbed her chin. Though, really we might be able to find a wagon with intact wheels and tires. It'd certainly save us a whole lot of walking. I thought you said you weren't going to turn this into a regular thing, I protested as I tugged against the harness and received another smack from the reins. Yeah, but that was before we found out how sweet it is to not walk our hooves to the nub, Rampage said with a laugh as she deftly sharpened her horned blade on the spinning rear wheel. I looked at Lacuna, gliding effortlessly beside me with a small smile on her lips. What? Oh, nothing. The alicorn's amusement was nearly palpable. I just thought I'd mention that there's a train coming this way. I looked ahead and spotted a dark shape on the tracks ahead of me. Lacuna lifted the hoof car onto some neighboring spurs as it got closer and closer, and... What the hell is that? I gasped. Clearly, the idea of having a pony pulling a cart wasn't new, but I never imagined a pony like this before. He was colossal. Twice as big, no, 10 times as big as Big Macintosh. His bright blue hide dripped with sweat as he walked along on hooves almost as big as my entire body. Bright yellow eyes looked down at us, and he gave a great snort at the sight of me hooked to the cart. "Wuss," the giant pony murmured as they rolled past. "Goliath! Don't you be talking to no riffraff!" shrieked a bony yellow unicorn mare from a little platform atop his back. "You let me handle this, you hear? You just keep on walking till you hit the every spur." "Yes, Mama," he sighed. He pulled 3 enormous rusty tankers and 2 flatbeds loaded with hundreds of stacked barrels. Scraggly ponies with hunting rifles watched us sullenly as they rolled by. There was a bright flash, and the bony unicorn mare appeared before me. "What's your business on this here railway?" she asked as she glared at, every pony. She twitched in aggravation. "And land's sakes, which of you're the pony in charge?" "That would be me," I said. She took one look at me in the harness and summed up my failed management skills in one look. "Right. Really? Which one of yours in charge?" she said, then looked at Lacuna. "You're with Red Eye?" "What if we are?" P-21 said coolly. "Then, I'd say you better have my pay ready. Express don't work no fancy talk of glorious futures. We work on pay per load, you hear?" she snapped. I noticed she had a huge scar across her belly. Landmine? My own stomach muscles twitched in sympathy. I wasn't exactly sure I had guts anymore. Glory looked back at the immense pony. "What happened?" She scowled at Glory. "'Tain't none of your beeswax, that's what happened." "But he's huge," Glory stammered, her jaw hanging open. "He's blue too," Scotch said dryly. "Just in case you missed that, Glory." The yellow unicorn snorted, but gave a little smirk to the olive filly. "My boy's the damnedest, biggest, strongest, dumbest, hungriest heap of pony who ever tangled with blue weed. Eats a whole damn tree every time we get him back along the Everfree." "Ah, killing joke," Lacuna said calmly. The yellow mare glared at the alicorn, but didn't deny it. "You're the Goliath Express, then?" "Hauling anything from Philly D to Trots to the Hoof to any damn place in between, if the pay's right," the crotchety old unicorn said proudly. Then she looked at Glory and pointed behind her at her son. "He's Goliath, in case you missed that." "But what's that stuff?" P-21 asked, as he looked at the receding train cars. She glared at him sourly and suspiciously. "Weren't paid to chat," she snapped. "Got better things to do than flap my lips at 6 idiots and a half-metal dog." I frowned, wondering if I'd have to thump her to get her my answers. Then reconsidered. Really, she was just trying to make a living. Be kind. "Scotch," I said as I looked at the filly. "Can you get me, say, 600 caps?" The filly dug through my saddlebags, found the painted bits of metal, and handed them out to the sour mare. "Now you are?" She took the caps in her magic, separated one into to look at it sharply, bit it, then shrugged and slipped them into her saddlebags. "You fail bribery 101, she snorted. "Kinda blatant, don't you think?" "You want caps? I want answers. You'd prefer alternative methods?" I asked, getting a few looks from my friends. Was I really threatening this scrawny yellow mare? Even I wasn't sure. For some reason, I felt my annoyance growing faster than usual. She seemed to pick up on my mood and relented, nodding towards the train. Barrels are full of some flamer fuel Red Eye wants. Burner Boy's been mixing it up special in the refinery for weeks now. The tankers? Don't know and don't want to know. Got a whole nother load waiting for us after this one, she said with a shrug. And have you been doing this long? Rampage asked. Working for Red Eye, I mean. She twisted her mouth into a scowl, before shrugging. Nah, Red Eye was using Ulstry to provide the materials. When she couldn't, Red Eye sent his boys. Then, rather than a couple dozen loads, he paid us to move it all for him in 5. She looked at me in the eyes with a frown, but then shrugged. Anywho, you tell that glowy-eyed son of a bitch I want my caps, and no funny business when this is over, you hear? Or else my boy'll turn that there fancy building into his next outhouse. Mama! Bawled the immense blue pony, his voice echoing across the scrubland. Your train's leaving without you, Glory said. The bony mare rolled her eyes in scorn. Goddess's sake. Anything else profound you want to say? Point out that it's a cloudy day? Tell me the water's wet? One-winged idiot. The bony pony unicorn snorted with a bright yellow flash and disappeared. I could barely make the corresponding flash on the back of the enormous pony. I closed my mouth, open to ask her about what had happened in the hoof, and then huffed softly. I guess I'd have to find out what happened in the hoof the hard way. You want to stop 'em? A few good blasts into those barrels should make some pretty expressive shows, Rampage said as Lacuna lifted the hoof car back onto the tracks. I sighed. I'm probably going to regret this, but no. They didn't attack us, and I really don't want to know what Goliath can do in a fight. Let's get home. I want to find out just what's going on there. I lowered my head. Let's see if I can't get a little more speed out of these things, I yelled as I started to run instead of walk. The sooner I got back, the better. It was weird. My back ached, my sides hurt, my ass throbbed, and my neck felt stiff as a board. But my legs were fine and dandy. I would need to chow down on some gems soon, though. There was a little blinking message in the corner of my eye telling me that my main energy storage was getting low. The cart was squealing too. Something was burning up inside it. Scotch had used up all her grease already, and it smelled like any second the cart was either going to lock up or catch fire. Maybe both. We were drawing close to Brimstone's Fall, though. I could see the outbuildings and the perimeter fencing. It looked fine and dandy. Quiet. Shit. Unhook me. Something's wrong, I muttered. Where was the cloud of rock dust? Where were the sentries? I shifted impatiently in the harness, my teeth working the battle saddle bit. Looking up to the north, I could see the Rosehoof Academy. It was smoldering, and the reinforced buildings were now streaked with a blackened soot. Once I was loose, I ran around with the railway gate and into the yard. The doors to the admin office and barracks were open, and there were sounds of banging, whooping, and hollering. A small mob of scavengers was picking the buildings clean, tossing anything not easily edible or easily converted into caps aside. Then, one, a rancid-looking ghoul if I ever saw one, noticed me. His eyes popped wide, and he croaked, "Reapers!" You know, right now, I felt like that term was pretty applicable. As the scavengers grabbed what they could and scampered, I chased him down in 3 leaps and pinned him outside the barracks, as the rest ran with whatever knickknacks they could carry. What happened here? Where is every pony? Where's Dusty Trails? I yelled into his face, beating him with my hooves. All my friends ran up to support me, save Lacuna, who hung back. I don't know. I don't know anything. The boiled-looking pony pled as he curled up defensively. Blackjack! Glory said sharply, snapping me out of my momentary rage. I looked down at his bent forelegs. I'd snapped both in my tackle and hadn't even realized it. Hadn't heard or felt a thing. I backed off, and she fished out one of our 10-pony Healing potions. I noticed I was already losing some of its color. It was potent enough to heal the ghoul, enough to hobble, though. Some radiation, and he'd be right as rain. Right? Came here this morning, with all the attacks. Heard there'd be top-notch salvage, he croaked. Please, don't kill me. Tell me more about the attacks, I said levenly, as I backed off enough for him to sit up. They started a few days back, right after the whole Celestia explosion that killed security and half the Rangers. Expert Merc band hit Megamart hard. I mean, hard. Then they scragged the group at Fluttershy's clinic. Then Stockyard. Marched the whole village into a radioactive hole and just waited for him to die. Cold, man, cold. Still, might mean a few new ghoulies. He chuckled with a wan smile. Hope some of them are cute. That got some hard looks from me, and his grin sickened as his milky eyes darted away. Anyway, that place was picked clean, and there was already a crew up at the school thing, so we came here. Just been an hour or so. Then the academy. Then here, I murmured. I scowled at him. But where is every pony? I demanded. I don't know. There was, no pony here. Honest. You think I can take a whole town of ponies with my bare hooves and swinging cock? He retorted. What cock? Scotch murmured scornfully. Oh, shit! Did that thing fall off again? He said as he looked around under him. I closed my eyes and shuddered with the effort to not buck him into pieces then and there. Get lost, P-21 said flatly. The ghoul nodded so fast it looked like his head would come off. Little flakes of hide sloshed off in a cloud. Right, yeah, getting lost. So lost. Now, where was I? He said as he staggered away. Hoofington Rises and shit. I turned and glared at him. What did you just say? He froze, clearly torn between running for his life and cowering for mercy. Slowly, I rose to my hooves and tightened my jaw, making Taurus's rifle cock. Me? Say? Fuck, I didn't say anything. Nothing at all. What you just said. Hoofington Rises. Why did you say that? Gloria asked as she stepped into the line of fire. The ghoul blinked in confusion. Well, I don't fucking know. It's just shit folks say these days. Like Sweet Celestia or Luna fuck my ass with a frosty strap on, you know? He looked at each of us desperately. It's just what people fucking say! I chewed the saddle bit. One jerk of my head and I could try out firing it. Be kind, a little yellow Pegasus reminded me. Do better. Gloria looked back at me, spooked at my anger. She seemed to be asking how I could pardon those four, but be so ready to smash one ghoul into paint. I had to admit it bothered me too. Why was I so angry at him? Go, P-21 murmured darkly. Can I? He pointed at his looted goods. Take them and go! I snapped. That was as kind as I was going to get right now. I knew that, for a scavenger like him, it'd mean the difference between life and death. But that didn't mean I had to be happy about it. When he was gone, I stomped my hooves. Any evidence probably got taken away by the scavengers who... Blackjack, Rampage said in a dark and even tone. I looked at her, then saw her pointing towards the metal doors with her armored hoof. I looked and froze. I'd been so occupied with the scavengers and the ghoul that I'd missed the letters painted 6 feet tall in maroon paint that wasn't paint. Security. Slowly, I trotted forward, looking at the bloody slop drying in a rusty bucket beside the door and the paintbrush subbed within. I pushed the door open, and a stench rolled over my nose and skin. I didn't know words to describe that metallic reek. All I knew was that it was bad. I didn't have a real stomach anymore. But if I did, I'd be puking like the rest of my friends. Lacuna groaned as she slumped. I looked at her sharply. Enervation? She nodded. Suddenly, my friends were looking at each other. They all seemed tired and drawn all of a sudden. It wasn't like this before, I said softly, looking at P21 and Glory for confirmation. But aren't you feeling it? P21 asked me in concern. That surprised me. No, actually. I didn't feel the lethargy or pain or anything. I just felt like me. No, I guess it's the cybernetics or something. I frowned. That didn't seem right. I'll check inside. You folks see if you can find anything not picked over yet. She throttles a scavenger, then tells us to scavenge. Inconsistent much? Rampage muttered, but our eyes met. I was pissed and she knew this wasn't the time. I took 2 steps in and nearly walked right into a recorder hanging from a rope in front of me. I looked at it for the longest moment before remembering that my horn didn't work. Damn it. Slowly, I reached out with my hooves and tried to tug it free. Finally, I just downloaded the contents from the device and gave it a shove, sending it swinging into the darkness. The air was thick and heavy and silent as I selected the audio file. I looked around. 1 Blue Barm EFS. If this was a trap, and it probably was, then they were probably using stealth bucks or zebra stealth cloaks. For several seconds there was nothing but the sound of machinery and the movement of ponies, but then a male rasped in a familiar voice. They say the 3rd time's the charm. Sanguine's words filled the dark tunnel as if he stood beside me. I always wondered where that came from. What is twice not trying hard enough and 4 times giving up 'cause you're fucked? Always wondered that. I found myself trotting faster, my augmented eyes picking out the gray rails of the tunnels and avoiding pitfalls as I looked for mines, tripwires, and other traps. The air felt wrong. It felt wet. There was another long pause. I guess that's not true, though. We've been waiting for hours, security, and you still haven't shown up. No words from that DJ fuck either. But I know you, security. I know that you didn't die with that ship. I don't care what they fucking say. You're alive, because if you're dead, then I'm fucked anyway. And if you're alive, then you're following me. You're just taking your time. I sped up, trotting past the little security station halfway in. Now I was tripping every now and then as I raced forward. Well, let me give you some more incentive to hurry your ass along. I want my program. My time is fucking up. I can't stay here anymore. That thing in the core is awake thanks to you. That shit is going to happen, all because of you. Red Eye might be able to stop it. Who the fuck knows? But I need a bargaining chip if he's going to keep me safe and sound. I need Chimera. For that, I need EDC 1101. There was a horrible silence, then the grinding of machinery, and the terrified sniffling and sobbing of ponies. Do it. Psycho Shy's voice broke in. Sanguine, you can't be serious. Stockyard was fucked up enough. Throw them in, now, he snarled. All of them. Save her for last. Whatever, murmured an unfamiliar voice. Toss 'em. And then the screams began, just like Gorgon had screamed. The gnashing metal noise became muted, pulpy. I didn't think, I simply ran. I ran as if I could somehow magically sprint back in time. I raced faster and faster, propelled by the screams of the ponies that I was already too late to save. And then suddenly, I was in the round cavern, the ledge ending abruptly behind me as I tried to stop. Momentum carried me onwards. It flipped me forward into the dark and still void. My hooves flailed in the air as I twisted, hoping there was some magical telescopic leg thing that would help me grab the edge. But there wasn't. As I fell, as horrified scream blazed out from my leg. The pool below broke my fall. It wasn't very big, wasn't very deep, but it was deep enough. My metal legs sent me straight to the bottom as I struggled and flailed. I opened my mouth and then I tasted it. I screamed into the thick soup and tasted blood. He'd put them all through the crusher. I'd flailed and struggled, trying to find footing beneath me. A little O2 gauge began to drop. I might have been cybernetic, but I still needed to breathe. I could see nothing, hear nothing. I felt bits bobbing and brushing against me as my hooves flailed and kicked out under me. I was going to drown in the crushed-up remains of dozens of pony workers. Then I felt hooves grab my neck and pull. My head broke the surface, then my mouth. I automatically took a breath, a reeking, coppery, iron breath. I wanted to be sick of all this. I wanted to wake up. "Stop it, Blackjack! Stand up!" P21 shouted into my ear. The interruption took only a moment or two, but it was enough to make me calm down. I got my hooves under me and stood. My muscles shook, my legs remained steady. The foul mixture of pony and rainwater was little more than chest high at the base of the crusher. The small blue buck carefully helped me along to where the ramp led up to the ledge, my superior weight threatening to drag me down and make me slip. I'd been lucky to fall where I had, and not get speared on the many spires of rock and broken bone. Right. I was lucky. Brimstone Fall wasn't. "You came in after me?" I asked, feeling the fetid mixture coating me, softly dripping off. I was so glad my low-light vision was in black and white. I could imagine the gray tones as just mud. "Nothing good ever comes from leaving you alone, Blackjack," P21 said with a small smile. Then he looked over at the remains. I guess there was enough light coming in from above for him to get a good enough look. How could any pony do this? I stared at the gory pool. There was no way of telling how many ponies had been put through the machine. Dozens? Hundreds? How many ponies had been working here? One thing was clear, though. Sanguine knew exactly how to get my attention. He'd known there was one surefire way to bring me to him. This was it. Then my ears twitched just a little bit. "Blackjack." I stared at P21, and the mayor's voice croaked out again. "Blackjack." I turned and saw a blue bar on my EFS align with the hopper bin of the rock crusher. A chill ran through me for a moment, and then I was scrambling up the lip of the bin. Thickened blood smeared the sides. A small heap of limbs and burst flesh lay at the bottom. And then part of the heap moved. Eyes opened in the gloom. "Hey, Blackjack," croaked Dusty Trails. I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the gruesome hopper and slid down beside the sand-colored earth pony. "Dusty, you're alive!" I couldn't believe it. "Take more than a rock crusher to kill me." She looked at my legs and smiled once more. "See, you got yourself some fancy new legs?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to smile. "Yeah, even got a radio built in." I looked at P21 as he pulled the torn goblets of flesh away with his hooves so we could see how she was trapped. He looked even more ill as he examined the area. She gave a weak little smile. "He stopped the feeder when I was halfway through the jaws." I looked down at her hips. Cast some healing magic on me. Made sure I survived," she said, and I reached out and held her. She was burning up with fever. "Told me to give you a message. Told me yesterday if I hung on, you might kill him. Fucking bastard." She coughed. "He was right. I hung on. I knew you'd come. Knew glory would save you." "Right. Now you hang on, and we'll find a way for Gloria to save you. Just hang on, I said with a sniff. But I couldn't see how. Her waist was trapped in a jagged 3-inch wide hole. Celeste only knew what condition her legs were in. I didn't have a second life support jar for her head. Don't be an idiot, she murmured with a frown. You ain't got time to waste on me. He's going to flank next. How'd he take you out? P-21 asked. Snipers. Armed with beam rifles. Took a few hours, but 2 of them picked off every pony with a gun. Then Griffins dropped stun grenades. Rounded us up with a bunch of freaks. After that, they marched us down here. Said they were waiting for you. Ghoul was half out of his mind. Kept waiting for you to show, talking to himself, jumping at his own shadow. Finally, he got sick of waiting and started tossing folks in. Saved me for last. Griffins? Red-Eye? I muttered. Maybe. If so, the way they were looking at him, if you don't kill him, they will. They're powerfully ticked off at the moment. She coughed again. Funny. I'm powerfully ticked off at him too, I said with a sniff. She rubbed her face with a gory hoof and looked at me. Think you can do something for me? Doubt they found it. Weren't much interested in looting. She pointed towards the exit tunnel. It's that way. I jumped and clambered out of the hopper, spotted the worn crate in the direction she'd pointed. Inside was a large clay jug. I recognized it from the arena and carefully cradled it as I walked back to the hopper. She looked up at me with a lazy smile. That sure is some funny zebra trotting you're doing on them fancy legs of yours. The original owner was half zebra, I replied, as I pulled out the stopper and was assaulted by the potent alcohol fumes. It actually cut through the stench of the room. I brought the opening to her lips, and she steadied it with her forehooves and took a long drink. Finally, she sighed. Mother's milk. She sniffed and looked up at P-21 and me. Promise me you'll drink the rest of this over his damned corpse. I couldn't trust myself to speak. I jerked my head in some spastic imitation of a nod. Can you send me on my way? It was Flank and Minnie all over again. She was dead. We all knew it. It was just a question of how long would it take her to die. Do it, Blackjack. Do it. Draw that fucking gun and give her peace. Yet I just sat there like an idiot. I couldn't move, couldn't draw vigilance, and give her the peace she'd so deserved. I'm sorry, I murmured as I hung my head. I wish I could. After everything I've been through, I still can't grant you that. It weren't your fault, you're a decent mare, she replied. Then she looked at P-21 calmly, and he didn't hesitate. Med-X? P-21 asked softly as he opened his saddlebags. 5 doses. 5 doses? Mare can really end her pain with that much, she said softly as he took out the syringes. If it were no matter at all, she began to inject herself with the chems. Oh, Blackjack. Can you do me one last thing? I slipped the moonshine into my saddlebags, and I looked at her. Name it. On your way out. There's this button, she said, her voice growing softer as more of the potent painkiller entered her system. Red. Key is in my hat. She sighed. Was going to use it, but got stunned before I could. I'll take care of it, I promised. I could do at least that. Take care of things. Better than I did? She sniffed as tears started to run down her cheeks. It was a good mine, Blackjack. I did right, didn't I? She began to foam at her mouth. Celestia'll be proud, won't she? She will. I know she will, I said as I held her, listening to her raspy breathing becoming more and more broken. Thank you. Thank you for all your help. 'Tweren't nothin'. She smiled slackly, pulled her battered hat off, and set it atop P-21's head. For the chems, best to settle debts. He nodded and then said softly, Yep. She slowly curled forward, pressing her face into my metallic limbs. Then she let out her breath in one slow rasp. Her blue bar disappeared from my EFS. And that was that. It took me a few minutes to pull myself away and crawl out of the hopper again. I reached down, hooked my hoof to P-21's, and pulled him up after me. I sat there, hanging my head. This was... He kicked me so hard I was knocked to my side. I blinked up at him in astonishment as he glared down at me, his breathing taut and hot. My head spun from the impact, and all I could do was gawk at him as he sat on my chest. If you say the words, my fault, I will hit you again, he said sharply, then grit his teeth and spoke slowly, his voice tense. This wasn't your fault. None of this. You didn't know this was going to happen. He stared down at me. And if you start with that I'm scum, or I fucked up, or anything, I will beat it out of you. I should have dealt with Sanguine sooner, I said. If I'd... Again, his hoofs thumped down against my face. Hard. I didn't... Another thump. I coulda... Thump. Finally, we just lay there, him panting and me feeling blood trickle from the swelling lip and nostril. We just stared into each other's eyes, angry tears dancing in his. I won't let you hate yourself for this. Damn it. He was right. As much as my instinct wanted to pin this all on myself, I couldn't. This was one burden that wasn't mine to bear. I smiled. Then, let's get the son of a bitch who did this. He helped me to my hooves and then tugged Dusky's wide-brimmed hat more squarely atop his bushy mane. We headed out and he murmured, I'm going to tell Scotch. About me. About her mom. Everything. He sighed softly, rolling his eyes a little. I guess we messed with her memories for nothing then, huh? We wanted to protect her and keep her happy, I replied as we made our way up. I kept a careful eye on him. He looked horrid and exhausted from the enervation, but I didn't think he was in fresh, melting territory yet. The field wasn't quite strong enough. Still, it'd make the mine a death trap for anyone working here. One nick that wouldn't heal a pony, and they'd be finished. And there was still a lot of gems in these rocks and tunnels. I spotted the red button she'd mentioned and grinned, rubbing my metal hoofs together. Then I reached for the shiny, candy-like button, and P-21 bumped my hoof aside. You ever think you should find out what a button does before you push it? He asked as he lay on his back, looking at the gap between the button and the wall. Case in point. Dynamite. I blinked and grunted. Why would Dusty want to blow us up? She didn't. She wanted to blow up anyone stupid enough to push a button, he said as he cradled the hat in his hooves and pulled a metal key out of the brim. He slipped it into something on the backside of the button and turned it. I reached for it once more, and once more he smacked my hooves away. But, key! I promise you can press the button. He looked a little more, and then nodded. Looks like the key activates a delay in the fuse. He whispered softly. She rigged the mine to blow. Guess the idea would be to get down here, get folks out through the tunnels or something, and blow the mine behind them. Smart. He sighed as he looked back the way it would come. Too bad the stun grenades ruined the great plan. So, button? I asked with a grin. He sighed and closed his eyes. Wait 15 minutes for us to finish searching on top and get cleared out. Push it, then run for your life. Outside. Then he trotted out, mumbling to himself about babysitting. I sighed as I waited, tapping my hoof against the wall beside the shiny button and sucking on chips and chunks of tasty gems. Each one gave me an invigorating rush, which in turn gave me inspiration for new and interesting ways to handle the job before me. Should I push it slowly or deliberately? Mash it with enthusiasm? A rear hoof jump push? It wasn't every day a girl could push a button rigged to a bunch of explosives. "You sure are one-twigged mare," the dealer murmured. I glanced over my shoulder at him. "You have a friend die in your hooves, and now you're giddy with glee at pushing a button while soaked in the blood of murdered ponies." "And talking to you," I added, refusing to let him interrupt my contemplation of buttons and the pushing of them. P21 already convinced me not to kick myself for not being able to stop this. As soon as I push this, we'll head to flank and try to think up some exciting creative ways to kill Sanguine.
"Why do you think Sanguine hit Stockyard?" the dealer asked softly.
Huh?
I blinked as I looked back at him.
Because he's a murderous asshole?
Think about it for a second. He attacks Megamart. Why?
I frowned. To draw me out.
But why Megamart? Why not, say, Toll or Flotsam?
He asked calmly.
They're closer to him. Instead, he went all the way over to Megamart. Why?
I sighed and set aside my contemplation of buttonness. Probably because they helped me?
But how would he know that?
He asked softly.
And after that, he hit the clinic. And then, Stockyard. Why Stockyard? They never helped you. Then, they burned the academy. There's not even any pony there, but he burned it. Why?
I frowned as I rubbed at my nose. Because that was the next place I visited? And then here. The blood drained from my face. But how would he know where I've been? I mean, he... Then I blinked as my eyes locked with his. He'd need my Pip-Buck navigation information.
Which was copied to Marmalade's Pip-Buck,
he murmured softly. Which I gave to him. I looked back towards the chamber. He told Dusty he was going to flank.
Then count yourself lucky. He's following the road rather than going strictly in order.
The dealer didn't take his eyes off mine as he asked.
But where's he going when he's done in flank?
I smashed the button and heard an electric fizzle. Then, immediately, turned and raced for the exit. I hit the door out with all four hooves and rolled out as it flew open, screaming to my friends to run. 15 minutes, Blackjack! I said 15 minutes! P21 yelled crossly as he came out of the bunkhouse. He's going to chapel, P21. After flank, he's going to chapel. The blue buck shut up immediately, and all six of us ran off through the rain, away from the mine. Moments later, the muddy ground thundered under our hooves as the charges blew off. We were outside the fence when the administration building blew apart in a cloud of wood and reinforced sheets. The flipping ends didn't even reach the ground before the bunkhouse blew as well. There was a rumble beneath our hooves, and a massive gust of wind as the chamber below collapsed. I watched as pits opened in the earth where we'd been standing. I hadn't anticipated just how big that chamber had been, until I saw the wide depression before me.
What is Pony thinking? Pony runs out and blows everything up,
Rover snorted.
Why does everything explode around Pony?
Listen, Rover. You need to get to Riverside, and your people. Sanguine's hitting every place I've stopped since leaving 99. We might have caught a break with Chapel, but if we didn't... I didn't want to think that far ahead. Instead, I pulled the harness on. Come on, I grunted as I pulled, but the wheels of the hoof car squealed as they locked up entirely. The bearings are burned out, Scotch said. We'll have to replace them, and I don't think we can go get parts, and I know we're out of grease. Even if we had this stuff, it'd take hours. I gave the car a kick. Of all the times to break down.
Dog will return to den and send warning to the river ponies. River ponies whine, but have good fish.
Rover said as he scratched behind his ear. Will you be able to make it safely? Glory asked in concern. Rover snorted and lifted his robotic hand, showing the razor claws.
Is good for more than digging rock, pony. Old dog know many tricks. Dog be fine. Ponies take care of ponies. Is what ponies good at,
he said, but for the first time there wasn't the usual bitterness in his voice.
Ponies stay safe.
We can just hoof it straight to chapel, Scotch Tape piped up. It would take a day, and we'd be crossing unexplored territory, P-21 countered. Rampage nodded. There's the Half-Heart's headquarters in this area, and a scratched sky wagon. That's a feral ghoul nest. We can follow the rail and cut over to chapel, but that's even further. So, same problem if we hoof it over to flank. Maybe Lacuna can go to Marimar, soak up some radiation, and teleport us all there? Glory asked. It would take many hours, Lacuna replied, the frustration clear in her thoughts. What if Blackjack went alone? She can move faster now, and she doesn't get tired, and with these legs of hers, Scotch offered as she wrapped her hoof on my enameled foreleg. That'd leave her outnumbered by a lot, Rampage said with a frown. Personally, that's fine for me, but I can't die. Blackjack doesn't have that advantage. Glory was looking in the direction of the strip mall. Blackjack? When we first came by here, we set a bunch of supplies and stuff on fire. Remember? Yeah, I replied. It was a little bit fuzzy. I was pretty sure there'd been some buck lobbing dynamite at me or something. Well, that was a lot of supplies. I doubt they carried all of it on their backs from flank. The Great Pegasus pointed out. You think they might have had a working wagon? I asked. She flushed and nodded. I seized her in my hooves and kissed her hard enough to curl her hooves. I love smart ponies. Let's go! We started towards the nearby strip mall, and I blinked back at Glory, still sitting there in a daze. Hey! Glory! She shook her head hard, losing her befuddled smile and catching up to me. For once, I was glad for the Hoofington rain. It was pouring down in full force by the time we reached the strip mall, and the bloody gore coating me had more or less washed off. For a minute, I was afraid we'd struck out and be left trying to run all the way to chapel. Then Rampage checked behind the strip mall and found a wagon that was only marginally rusted. One tire was flat and one axle squealed when Rampage pulled it out, but Scotch just rubbed her hooves together. I'm going to need Lacuna to levitate it up. Gonna need some wonder glue, some turpentine, a hunk of inner tube, and some grease. Any grease or oil you can get your hooves on. With that, she got out a wrench, and we were scrambling. Fortunately, P-21 found an oil can in the back of the bar, and Glory found the inner tube and helped Scotch work. And me? I put 4 bits into the jukebox, selected a song, and kicked the side of the machine with my hoof. The lights flickered, and then the machine gave a dry hum. I dug behind the bar, and, hidden behind a dozen glasses, I found a flask of Wild Pegasus. I trotted up to the table, dusty and I'd sat at so long ago, and practiced with my fingers, setting up the 2 least grimy shot glasses I could find. The machine clicked and the music began to play. Out of habit, I started to record as I sat back and looked at all the cards scattered around the table. I chewed through another mouthful of gems, then looked at one of the face-down cards on the table in front of me and stared. I tried to imagine the magic reaching out. Tried to imagine it like a wind brushing against it, the book had said, like blowing on it without using your lungs. I closed my eyes, trying to focus even though my temples throbbed and my useless stub of a horn ached. I tried imagining blowing the card over. I felt the faintest magic buzz and tingle in my horn. Then I chanced to look down. Queen of Spades, Princess Luna, smiling up at me. It wasn't much at all, but it was a start. I leaned back, extended my fingers and picked up the shot glass as the song came to an end. I lifted my glass to the empty chair across from me. Who was I lifting it to? Dusty Trails? Sure. But I was also raising it to Rivets and Midnight, to those ponies in Stockyard killed simply because of a blip on my pip buck. In a perverse way, I was lifting it to Deus as well, one monster to another, in a silent pledge. Sanguine had been around for way too long. It was time to finish the bastard. The jukebox crackled and finally died. I rose to my hooves and trotted out the door. My friends looked at me, and I must have been wearing the most damned shootiest look that I'd ever worn by a mare because they didn't say a word. Scotch and Luna hitched me up to the wagon. I took the bit in my mouth and glanced back to make sure every pony was aboard. Glory climbed up onto the seat at the front of the wagon and took my reins. I looked back at her and grinned. Giddy up? She asked, giving them a little shake. No, Glory. Not giddy up. Ante up. I wasn't the strongest pony in the wasteland, but as I leaned into the harness between the covered wagon's shafts, I felt an unfamiliar but welcome orange pony pulling right alongside me. Be strong, she told me. And right beside her was a blue Pegasus telling me that I was going to pull it off, and that it was going to be so awesome. With those two pulling alongside me, I couldn't just run. I could practically fly. With an eep from my pilot, my 4 mechanical legs lunged forward, and we raced down towards the east. Sanguine wanted to find me. He'd found a perfect way. I'm coming, Sanguine. And I'm bringing a whole lot of hurt with me. Pulling a wagon had to be the most startling effect of focusing my world. Every bit of my energy was put into moving forward. While my legs weren't all that bothered, I had plenty of flesh and blood bits that were stressed and sweaty. I pushed through the pain. Atrocities take time. The bastard wanted me to catch up to him. I just had to do it before any pony else died. Glory and Scotch guided me. With all my attention on running, I had no time to look for washed-out sections of the road, abandoned wagons left as barricades or bars on the EFS. I was too busy running. Since DJ Pony was off the air temporarily, my pip-buck played some of the mixer's finest, and time slowed down to just the present. I didn't have time to think about the future. I didn't have the energy to think about the past. I just had to pull the reins, and the thudding of my hooves and the rattle of my cart to tell me what to do next. Then I felt the reins pull back and the squeal of the wagon's brakes. Obstinately, I wanted to keep running, but then sense settled in. There was a good reason to stop. We were here. Glory hopped down beside me, and I looked at the wall of rubble that had been erected around the town. There was smoke and fire, but not a whole lot of shooting. I still couldn't feel myself breathing. My vision was flashing warnings about dehydration, caloric intake, and power reserves again. Why'd my insides have to be written in egghead? Glory hopped out and immediately cracked open a bottle of filtered water with her teeth and hooves and held it to my mouth. I sludged it down as Scotch released me from the harness. My body hurt wasn't the accurate term. I wasn't in pain so much as a full-body ache spread through my organic parts. Was that because I'd just never really put myself to moving like this before, or something else? Once I'd finished the bottle of water, I was unhooked. I trotted my way clear a bit and looked around. Flank had seen better times, but it looked, surprisingly, that Caprice had followed through with my suggestions. 2 of the turrets Glory had made were still functional atop their buildings. The single gate had been blown open, but judging by the dead ponies scattered around it, the assault had cost the attackers dearly. Is it just me, or does the enervation feel worse? Glory asked, looking at the pained expression on Lacuna's face. I don't know. I can't feel it just yet, I said as I trot towards the main gate, alert for red bars. Maybe something was turning up the enervation across the whole valley. Wasn't that a pleasant thought? I still couldn't feel the tearing sensation or the fatigue, though. Was I just not being affected by the energy drains? Or were my synthetic parts resistant to the field's power? Trotting towards the settlement, I looked around. I remembered the addicts, the half-starved ponies lingering outside in the marshy ruins of the town, but they were nowhere to be seen now. Instead, there were a cluster of tents and banners, 3 black vertical bars on a green field, and a couple dozen ponies standing around, watching us head into flank. They weren't shooting at us, and I didn't see any monster ponies, so for the moment my curiosity was sated. Still, I'd have to check them out. Soon. I made my way inside, looking at the metal wagons turned on their sides and braced together to form a secondary security wall. From the scorching on the inside, they'd been attacked by some sort of flamer, so intense it'd slagged the metal. Rooms was on fire still, and from the 4 dead manticores, it was clear that at least one monster pony had been here as well. Still, Blank had clearly put up a tougher fight than Brimstone's Fall. I couldn't imagine a beam rifle snipers picking ponies off through the chain link that had protected the settlement before. The defenders split in 2, guarding both entrances. Then, from out of nowhere, a red bar appeared. A mare in pink barding racing at me faster than I'd ever imagined a pony could move. In a flash, she was in my face, and so was the revolver in her jaws. I rolled away just in time to avoid a bullet to the forehead. Still, her next 3 shots bit through my barding, barely slowing. Her pupils were tiny points in her pink eyes, and she was on top of me before I could recover. The mare was smaller than me, but her hooves slammed into me with more force than I'd thought possible. Rampage tackled her off of me, the pair rolling across the rain-slicked street. Another frenzied mare charged Glory, a pair of metal batons glowing as the Pegasus turned and hoisted her attacker with green beams of magic. Astonishingly, the mare didn't seem phased at all as the bolts burned at her flesh. Glory raised her hooves as the batons smashed into her face and legs. Lacuna's magical glow wrapped around the frenzied mare and threw her back. She rolled, tried to raise, and failed, but 2 more ponies raced to their fallen ally and jabbed her with epidermics. In an instant, she was back on her hooves again. I aimed some suppressive fire at the 3, and they took cover, at least for the moment. "Stay down!" Rampage roared as she raised her hooves and smashed them down on the thrashing mare. The earth pony kicked out furiously, denting her armor. "Stay down!" she repeated with another stomp of her forelegs. The kicking mare bounced. She still kept trying to get back up. "Stay down!" Rampage yelled. The mare rose to her hooves, bleeding and broken and still on the attack. One more stomp and the mare's head crunched like a nut. She trembled and went still. Rampage's pink eyes met my own, and she gave a shrug. "I told her to stay down." There were a lot more red bars on my EFS now. The ponies, matching them, fighting with incredible ferocity and resilience. They were coming out of mixers. I had no idea where P-21 was in all this, but I hoped he could hear me. "P-21! Kill the robot in the club!" I had a distinct worry that this was what everything did to a mare. I moved around as quick as I could. One downside of the battle was that it made me less effective in melee combat. Pumped up with Stampede and Buck, these mares' kicks and blows hurt. I almost preferred getting shot to some of the apple buck kicks that connected. I moved away, clenching my jaw on the left trigger and blasting buckshot. The lead was little more than irritating to the mare that it hit, but I didn't know how to swap out ammo without my horn, and I lacked Earth Pony tenacity and resilience. Scotch tried to keep behind me as the 2 circled. "Scotch, I need the green shells," I said, tossing her my back. "Got it. Use the rifle," she yelled, and I twisted my jaw to the right side. I didn't have a chance to hit. The mares were so jazzed up on dash that I didn't think they could physically stop moving at that point. I heard the sounds of the Olafili attach a belt of green shells to the shotgun. Not a real Iron Pony, but a semi-automatic IF-84. "You're loaded!" The green toxic rounds weren't much more fatal than the lead, but the chemicals slowed the ponies' movements enough that I was able to plant a few more solid rounds in their torsos. Still, under the effects of Stampede and Med-X, and probably Hydra too, they just weren't dropping. Worse, they had plenty of fresh healing potions on hand and weren't shy about using them. Suddenly, there was a loud whistle, and P-21 emerged from mixers with a familiar, pitched-looking medical pony in tow. One of the frenzied mares moved back, shaking with the effort not to attack. The unicorn lifted a strange tube in her magic, loaded with some sort of dart, put the end of it to her mouth, and shot the dart out the other end at one of the mares, harrying me. She took 3 steps, staggered to the side, and fell on her face. Another dart, the next one went down. The mares were frothing at the mouth as I moved back, letting the flank security mares see to their dosed comrades? They were all wearing the same uniform. Scalpel looked at us and said sourly, "Sorry, didn't recognize you. Thought you might have been those mercs come back for another round and those nut jobs across the way." She looked at the lucid mares in their pink security barding. "Come on, get them back to my office before their hearts stop." "What did you shoot them with?" I asked. "Fixer and moondust solution," the doctor replied smoothly. Now that the fight was over, ponies were coming back into the streets. Lacuna was seeing to glory, her horn glowing as she healed the Pegasus's injuries. I, if I was right about what the glowing messages in my vision said correctly, needed something entirely different to fix my damage. I looked around, gave the melted barricade a second look, and then eyed a spur of metal. I bit down, trying to close my mouth enough to activate the softening spell. Finally, the rusty metal peeled off, and I chewed it with a disapproving face. Needed salt. "I suppose, after 3 prices, I shouldn't be surprised by what you can eat," said a familiar voice. Caprice didn't look well. Some of her softness had worn thin, and her quiet humor was now silent worry. The peach mare looked at me in concern with a shaky smile. "I'm glad Glory was able to fix you up. She said you were pretty bad." "I was," I said as I looked around at flank while the rain fell upon us. Thick black smoke billowed from the first and second floors of rooms. "You got hit pretty hard, too." "Thanks to you," snapped an orange unicorn mare as 4 of her fellows glared at me. "Citrine?" Caprice said in a tired tone. "If Blackjack hadn't made us step up our defenses, none of us would have made it to 69 or gotten into mixers. We would have been completely at their mercy. And considering the people who hit you put every pony in Brimstone's Fall through their own rock crusher, I doubt that would have been pretty easy," P-21 added as he stepped up beside me. "And if you'd just given Sanguine what he wanted weeks ago, then hundreds of ponies would still be alive," Citrine retorted with a sweep of her hoof. "I heard the DJ talking about you, your noble sacrifices for other ponies. Well, how many ponies have died because you've hung on to whatever he wants? Hundreds? Or are you up to thousands now?" "He's a monster," Glory objected. "And what is she?" Citrine demanded as she pointed a hoof at me. "Since she showed up around the hoof, everything's gone from bad to worse. We didn't have Griffin Mercs, monster ponies, and bounty hunters attacking us every other week till she turned up. If she hasn't killed folks on her own, then she's gotten everything stirred up." "Citrine, that's enough," Caprice said, now with an edge in her voice. "Blackjack didn't ask for any of this to happen." "No, but she sure was willing to shed rivers of blood to keep it going," the orange mare said, and worse, more of the ponies listening looked angry. "What's so damn special that he wants that you can't give up?" I hung my head, her words echoing in my ears. Was all of this really my fault? If I'd just handed it over at the beginning, could I have prevented all this? "Why don't you just give it up? Do you even imagine what she's been through to help every pony in the hoof?" Glory demanded. "Can you even imagine?" "Oh, shut up, turkey. Go back to the clouds. You can't imagine what she's done to life here in the hoof," Citrine countered. "Dozens of half-hearts dead in a war she started. The fillies are gone because of her. the Rangers blown to pieces. So I want to know what the hell she has that's worth more than all those lives. It's the key to Equestria! I shouted over the din, and even Citrine went silent. It's the key to firing every mega spell still charged. It unlocks every dirty secret weapon from 2 centuries ago. I'd let Sanguine make an army of monster ponies. And that's just Sanguine. My voice fell as I sat down hard. For all I know, it's the key to getting into the core. Or something even worse, I said as I closed my eyes. Blackjack, P21 said as he put a hoof on my shoulder. No, P21. She has a point, I said, and I looked Citrine out of the corner of my eye. Holding on to this has cost me every pony in my stable, save 2. It's forced me to kill dozens due to a stupid bounty. It's thrown one of the deadliest ponies ever known against me. And then I looked at her and snapped. You think that I haven't thought of just giving it up, handing it over? Maybe I would have, if you'd told me to a month ago that I'd lose both eyes and all 4 legs over it, or lose almost every pony I knew. But I didn't. And once I found out what it could do, I shook my head and rose to my hooves, stepping towards the orange mare and staring into her yellow eyes. Do you want Sanguine to have that kind of power? Or Red Eye? Or some pony even worse than both of them? Because that's what's at stake. I had to give Citrine credit. She kept her eyes locked on mine for half a minute before she said slowly, That might be true. All I know is that I lost a mother when Deus came after you, a brother when the Half-Hearts fought the Rangers, and a little sister when... She stopped and looked up at the burning rooms building before sniffling. And, sorry, any one of them was worth 1,000 keys to Equestria. With that, she turned and walked to join the mares watching rooms burn. Caprice trotted beside me. You should probably go. I looked at her and saw the apology in her eyes. Yeah. Did they go north? I asked as all of us trot out the main melted gate. I knew the answer, and I pretended I could feel my heart rise in my chest. I found a tin can in the gutter and bit down, trying to get my teeth to soften it so I could chew. Caprice made a face. Clearly, the sight of fingers on the end of my limbs and me eating tin were turning my visit a little surreal. 3 or 4 hours ago, Caprice said. We'd killed off about 20 or 30 of their foot soldiers before the monsters got into the fray. They had a pony who breathed fire and another who exploded. After that, we were falling back. But then, the griffins in power armor were getting pretty impatient. They looked ready to waste Sanguine themselves. Nasty bastards. Red Eye's got a couple in his employ, I said as we trot out back outside. I felt Citrine's eyes on my back. But I glanced back and saw her yellow eyes turn towards the burning building. Psycho Shy said Sanguine was in deep shit. Caprice nodded. He is. If you do nothing, I think they'll waste him. I can't wait. They're going to chapel, I said softly. Fighting griffins and monster ponies. I needed something. A plan. Some sort. Then I looked at her for a long moment. Will you help me? Caprice returned my gaze. If you promise me you'll kill the son of a mule? I do. You're not the first I've made that promise to, I answered. I told her what I needed, and she nodded. It was going to cost us a serious chunk of caps, and that was with our discount. When she finished taking my order, I nodded my head towards the small encampment. What's their story? Is that where Sanguine's guys made camp? No. They're followers of the Prophet, Caprice replied with clear distaste. Bunch of wackos thinking they're going to find some sort of paradise in the core. Do they? I think I'll go have a chat with them, I said, then looked at the peach pony as she turned away. Caprice. She looked back in concern. I'm sorry. I only hoped I imagined P21 grinding his teeth like that. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you back when we were trying to make flank more secure. I really thought you were just pretending not to know who I was, she said with a little half-smile. Yeah, well, this whole thinking thing is really challenging for me, I said with a rueful smile. She looked sad and regretted as she smiled back. I'll talk to Scalpel and see what you need. Shouldn't be more than half an hour, Caprice said in a polite tone of deference, then stopped. Blackjack. She looked evasive for a moment. About Deus? It's old news, Caprice. He's dead. Ulcery is scraping up ramen turds. There's nothing else to say, I said with a smile. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes slid away. Yeah, sure. Sorry. She gave a little smile. I'll get your stuff. Oh, and if you got any grease lying around, we could use it, Scotch piped up, pointing at the wagon. Damn thing wobbles and whines worse than blackjack after a crate of wild Pegasus. I do not wobble and whine when drunk. I have it on good authority that I'm undefeatable while drunk out of my gourd, I said with a prim nod. Of course, once it all metabolized. Don't ask about the bathtub, P21 said with a shudder. I'll be saying hi to your new neighbors, I said with a glance over at the collection of tents. Please don't tell me you're going to make enemies with a new bunch of ponies, Glory said with a sigh. I'm just going to talk, I snorted. I don't make enemies with every group of ponies I cross in the hoof. Fallen Arch, Rampage said with a small roll of her eyes. The Flashers, Burners, technically Reapers too, though that's our special edition. You certainly didn't make a very good impression with the Enclave intelligence when you ran across them, Glory pointed out. And you nearly speared Triage through the throat after she saved you at the collegiate, P21 added. I think it would be better if we did not add how the goddess feels about you, Lacuna murmured. I felt something winding up in my brain, like a wire that was drawn too taut that was about to snap. I was trying to do better. Really, it wasn't my fault I met enemies as easily as sneezing. Okay, fine. I'm going to walk over there, say hi, and probably meet another group of ponies who want to kill me, I said with an indignant snort, lowering my head as I grumbled to myself. Okay. Good enough for me, Rampage said as she trotted up next to me and grinned back at my friends. What? I don't mind pony shooting at her. A lot less boring than all that negotiating stuff. The two of us trotted towards the tents, and Rampage asked quietly, How's Scotch holding up? I don't know, she asked. I asked as I looked over at her. She seemed fine in Ten Pony? She was a mess in Ten Pony. When you died, I had to go out and pick a fight with some alicorns and what they call raiders there just to get away from her, Rampage said with a worried look. She's trying to put on a brave face now that you're back, but I think she still blames herself. She's also scared to death of male ponies now. Huh? I frowned. They didn't touch her. The thought froze me into my hooves. Did they? Had I missed one and didn't hear it? Rampage snorted. Blackjack, she didn't have to be raped. They worked you over for an hour and she heard it all. I think the only buck she can be around at this moment is P21. Rampage looked back to where Scotch, Glory, and Lacuna were fixing the weapon. Pretty sure she wets the bed. I sighed, ears drooping. Great. Another thing I need to address. Or you could have P21 talk to her about it. I would talk to her myself. I've gone through a plowing more than a few times. But if she starts bawling... The striped pony gave a sickly smile before shrugging. You've been raped. I blinked and received yet another, "You're being stupid again, Blackjack." Look, was this something from Twist or something else? I couldn't imagine any pony raping Rampage. "I told you I had," she said, and I wanted to kick myself for forgetting. How do you forget that? She snorted and shook her head in my laps. "Lots of ponies in the wasteland have been raped. Mostly mares, but bucks too. Flashers are notorious for it." I sighed and looked in the direction of the air station. "When I was pried out of the wreckage at Marimare, I was in a blank state. I was also a hole. The ghouls who kept me pimped my ass out to every buck with a twitchy ball sack. Celeste only knows how I didn't get knocked up. Maybe I did and just killed the foal. Like Hope," she said in that horrible, fragile voice. "One day, these two ghouls got bored and sold me to the folk that got Paradise started. After a while, though, I figured out that explosive collars aren't much of a deterrent when you can regrow your head. I busted out, and I was on my own again. Bonesaw and Scalpel were kind enough to win me over. The first two didn't try to inseminate me for caps." "Then how are you so normal?" I mean, I stammered as she looked at me like I was an idiot. Again. Which, to be fair... "Normal? What makes you think I'm normal, Blackjack? I have nightmares, the old flashbacks. Every time I came to 69, I paid a mare to let me sob into her chest for an hour or two and call her mommy. Then I'd pay twice as much just to keep her quiet. Crybaby reapers are a liability," she said with a grin, but I saw past it into her eyes. "Sometimes I'll go into a place and I can just see the looks. The I can fuck you if I want look. I wear jagged steel armor and I'm as strong as 3 ponies, and I still get that look. So what I want to know is, how are you so normal?" "Huh?" "I heard from P21 and Glory. You were a glazed donut, by her account. I smelled the blood and spunk. Probably still can on the seahorse. So why aren't you a cringing ball of terror around males?" I looked at her flatly. "I think we should hurry up and go." But she jumped in front of me. "No, really. What's your secret? I mean, you probably had 4 different cocks in your ass and mouth. Look, we don't have time," I murmured, going red. "I mean, did you choke or swallow fast enough?" "Rampage, I don't want to fucking talk about it. It happened. It's over. Fucking drop it." "I mean, to get that plow to be perfectly fine." "Shut the fuck up, Rampage!" "Or did you have it a little..." I smashed my hooves into her face. "Shut up!" And suddenly I couldn't stop. I had to kick and kick and kick again. Her blood splashed over me as a dark rage suddenly flowed out of my brain like boiling acidic blood. I hated her. I hated her for picking open the wound. I hated her for being wounded in the first place. I thought that I could just ignore it, that I had gotten lucky and it hadn't affected me, that somehow I'd owned that dreadful hour back on the seahorse. I wanted to smash her to pieces. I wanted to hurt her as badly as I'd been hurt. My fingers found a brand new function as they locked against her throat and squeezed with every bit of force that I could muster. She'd never ever hurt me again. Never. I'd tear her head off before I let her. I squeezed harder, feeling the cartilage give and listening to it crackle. And then I looked down at her battered face and crushed neck and jerked my hooves back. Pink light flashed as her injuries healed before me. In another pony, I imagined Glory or P21, Scotch. I sat down, glad for the rain. So glad for it. She looked up at me with a sure smile as she healed. "Sure. You're just fine. Aren't ya?" she rasped with soft sarcasm. I'd been raped. I wasn't okay with it. I was also damned angry. I wanted to kill some pony. I was scared that it'd happen again, and I was ashamed. No matter how I tried to rationalize it, no matter how I tried to make it sound like it'd been preferable, the fact was that I'd been hurt. Hurt bad, maybe forever. I wanted to shake, but everything was a damn calm inside of me, aching. Rampage groaned and rolled onto her belly. Ow. Therapy isn't supposed to hurt this much. Rampage, I stammered in horror. She sighed as she looked at me. You didn't do anything that any mare or buck who's been through that wouldn't have done. Slowly, she rose to her hooves and shook herself. You have a nasty tendency to repress yourself. So do I. So does P21. But you need to know these landmines are there now, because otherwise some pony is going to come along and step on them, and it's going to be ugly. Right, I murmured softly. Victim. I used to thinking of other ponies as the victims. They were the ones who hurt, and I was the one dealing with addressing it. Victims were weak and helpless, like dusty trails caught in the crusher. Ponies to be saved by ponies bigger and stronger and nicer, like me. Was all my supposed heroism just an excuse to feel superior? I couldn't say for certain, but the thought had me shivering in my synthetic legs. I looked at the blood speckling my hooves, and imagined it coming from one certain Pegasus. The night in 10 pony had been wonderful, no question, but sitting here now in the rain, I thought back. One wrong touch, one reckless moment, and I could have hurt Glory just as badly as I had Rampage. The thought nearly floored me, and I looked back at Glory and, way over by the wagon, barely visible through the rain in the distance. Pink, Celestia, none of them seemed to realize what I'd done. That's why you were able to talk to P21. And you couldn't. And that's why I can talk to you like this, and about this, and Glory can't. She said quietly as we continued towards the tents. No offense, but couldn't you have waited till after we pulped Sanguine? I've got to say, your timing stinks. Why'd you let Citrine spout off to you like that? She asked with a nod over her shoulder back at flank. She was right, I muttered. She was hurt, and you knew it. And you know hurt, Blackjack. There's a difference between hurt and right. Her pain didn't make her right. If pain were all it took to be right, then every half-baked raider in the wasteland would be in the right doing whatever they wanted. We're all victims, Blackjack. The only difference is what we do with our hurt. She nudged my rump with her own. That'll be 50 caps for one 3-minute wasteland therapy session. I couldn't help myself, laughing softly. So there is a therapist in the wasteland. You bet. Helping you makes it easier for me to repress and ignore all my own fucked upness. She laughed. I shook my head as we reached the little encampment, and several things struck me at once. There was only about 20 or so ponies sitting around the fires. At once I took in their grubby and gaunt appearances. It didn't match their clothes. These looked practically new, and their weapons still had the sheen of manufacturer's oil. Boxes of pre-war food were stacked in heaps, but for the overabundance, the ponies just sat in circles around their fires, humming one continuous tone. A tone I'd heard before. I sat down with a sensation of horror creeping over me. I glanced beside me at Rampage and imagined her covered in whole cadavers. P21 as a bloody tyrant, his own daughter a breeder, and Glory. Glory made a thing. I wanted my heart to pound. I wanted to gasp for air. I wanted to scream. Rampage was saying something as I fell on my face, hugging it, trying to black out the thoughts, trying to stop the noise. I'd seen exactly this, heard exactly that. It had been a dream, hadn't it? Or had it been some kind of vision? Had it even been my dream, given how mutated my body was at the time? Then I heard the faintest voice, A little chime, quiet and pure, filling my ears. Slowly, I lifted my face and looked around for the source, but I could see none. Rampage knelt next to me, shaking me.
Hey! Hey! You okay? Should I get glory? Should I start with the mayhem?
I struggled to clear my mind and think as those two tones fought inside of it. Gradually, thankfully, both faded and I pulled my wits together. I looked at Rampage and slowly shook my head. A part of me really wanted to open fire. There was something fundamentally wrong with that note. But I couldn't kill ponies just sitting there. No, I said. I'm fine. It's all just a little creepy. From the look on Rampage's face, she didn't believe for a moment that I was telling even half the story. This, maybe, was the worst I'd ever see her worry.
You sure?
Yeah. Let's just go talk to them. I need answers.
Well, okay. Just let me know when to start the rampaging,
she said with a familiar wide grin, and only a fading hint of that worry had gone. I steeled myself, facing the encampment again, and stepped forward. A brown earth pony approached, all welcoming smiles and apparently paying no attention to my episode. Something ugly growled at the back of my mind. He was too clean, too well fed.
Welcome. I'm Augur.
Have you come to join the faithful? I looked at the corkscrew cutie mark drilling through a heart. I suppose this was a step up from his old life? Faithful? I asked as I looked around at the humming ponies. What? Them? His smile faded a touch. The faithful have come to this city of wonders to be saved from the horrors of the wasteland. Soon the doors shall open, and we will return to a world of plenty and paradise. He immediately reached over and scooped up a box of sugar apple bombs. Please, accept this blessing of plenty from the hoof. I took the box in a hand and looked at it skeptically. On the one hoof, I was really leery of anything accepting from these ponies. On the other hoof, the box looked unopened. I could eat rocks and rusty old cans, and I was hungry, and these were sugar apple bombs. Well, the hum probably wasn't contagious through food. I shook the cereal into my mouth and chewed. My eyes popped wide. Even for sugar apple bombs, these were good. Where did you find this? The city guided me to an old recharging station in which we found that treasure. Treasure? You have no idea, I said around a mouthful. This was the best of the best cereal ever, and I was hitting my snacky perfectly. I licked the powder off my lips and then frowned. I looked at the box. Something was off. You said this was in a recharging station? Indeed. The city will always provide to the faithful, Augur proclaimed. Food for the hungry, ammunition, weapons, and barding for our protection. Even potions unravaged by innovation. This box is new, I said softly. Rampage frowned and leaned towards it. No fading, no dust, no warping. The cereal inside tastes new too. A miracle of the city, a bounty for the faithful. You know, in my old stable we had machines that could make food like this. Oh, sure, not as good or as varied, but yeah, food from machines. I shook the box between my hooves. What I want to know is where the machines are. Clearly not the way he wanted my line of questioning to go. The glories of the hoof are not for us to question or to ponder, he said in a faintly hurt tone. If you are not prepared to join us, then I suggest you should take our gift and leave. But I would suggest you not begrudge those who have so very little and have suffered so very much. I don't. But I do question where such plenty comes from, and who's pulling the levers and why, I said as I stood. Thanks for the cereal. I picked up the box in my mouth, He hadn't sounded like he'd been hiding something. A true believer, I guess. We started back, but the Nogger trotted up to us. One last moment. You two seem formidable. There's a mare that has something we greatly desire. She is the murderess called Security. She wears a black device on her left hoof. If you find this mare, if you bring us what she wears, we will provide you with riches beyond compare. I stared at him for the longest time. I swore I heard my left foreleg rattle like 100,000 bottle caps. Good to know. What do you want it for? It is the key to our entry to the hoof, he said with a broad smile. We have seen it in a dream. You're not the only one. When we have it, the door shall open wide, and we shall be permitted to enter the core. He bowed his head to us. Hoofington rises. As he left, I gave one look at Rampage. All we needed was for this guy to talk to Citrine, and I was going to have a whole lot more trouble. But what could I do? It wasn't like I could just kill him. Actually, I could. In fact, I was with the one mare who'd probably just fine with it. I slipped into sats and used my hooves, and I shook my head hard. Killing a buck just to make my life easier? That wasn't me. Yet as I glanced back, that one ugly voice in my head told me that I should do it anyway. Just to be safe. Just in case. One less pony after my head. One step further from that dream. I glanced at Rampage and saw the sympathy in her pink eyes, the acknowledgement of what was in my head. Let's go, I said with a sigh, doubting I would ever get to be so open ever again. Back at the wagon, we needed a name for it. Road Bandit? Something. Anyway, once we were back, we saw that Caprice had brought my order. I shouldered it into the harness once more, tore 2 holes in the cardboard box, and slipped my ears through, burying my muzzle in the sugary goodness. Well, at least I'd got a box of my favorite cereal out of it. New bonus to having a piece of machinery for a stomach. No cramps after eating. Actually, I wasn't sure what I was feeling, but I don't think that cramp was quite describing it. It was more like a strange whirling sensation where my stomach used to be. Whatever it was, though, it didn't seem to be having an effect on my pace. I pulled us as fast and steady as I could, sucking down on a sapphire and some water every now and then to keep up my energy. Yeah, I had energy supplies now instead of rumbling stomach pains. That was good, because every minute that passed by, I was moving a little faster and a little faster. I thought of Chapel and the fillies being forced to march across the bridge and the colts tossed into the churning river. The rain was getting heavier and thunder was beginning to growl overhead. Little flickers of lightning danced between the dark clouds. I hoped Thunderhead was just feeling bored or something. I did not need to spend a few hours unconscious again. We passed Blue Blood Manor and finally spotted the village. No smoke, no fires, no bodies littering the streets, and there were lights in the post office and little church. For the briefest of moments, I could have pretended everything was okay. Sanguine was dead in a ditch somewhere. We could have dinner at the Star House. Everything was going to be fine and peaceful. That illusion was destroyed in a yellow flash that sent my head reeling and me crashing into the asphalt. Glory jerked the brake, and I was still ground along the broken road, and left a few square inches of my face on the tarmac. Slykoshai twisted so hard I thought she'd snapped in two, and came at me once more. But Glory's stream of emerald beams made her veer off, and instead fly by the wagon. There were a flash and a crackle as her powered hooves discharged and smacked Glory clear off the seat. I rose to my hooves and at once slipped into sats, then gaped at the low hit probability. Was she really moving that damned fast? 3 shotgun blasts fired in slow motion and not one hit her. Then time sped back up and she curled in and dove again. "Unhook me!" I shouted, firing wildly to force her off to the side. I felt Scotch scramble at the pins holding the cart. P-21 had persuasion out, but he'd need her to land before he'd have a chance of blowing her wings off. That left Lacuna. The purple alicorn was large, glorious, and magical. She was also, unfortunately, slow. Her magic arrows streaked in at deadly barrage at Psycho-Shy, and she left them in the dust. Lacuna's shield flared with each connection of those power hooves, and all four of them striking precisely to maximize force. Without the cage to constrain her, Psycho-Shy could move ridiculously fast, and the alicorn was getting more than a little worn out by the powerful and precise flyby attacks. Then I was free and stepped ahead. "Lacuna, try and grab her!" "We are trying, but she is infuriatingly swift," the alicorn said into my mind. "Not happening!" Psycho-Shy shouted, as she reversed with a powerful snap of her wings and corkscrewed straight at Lacuna. With an explosive crack, the yellow Pegasus blasted right through her shield and smashed both forehooves against her skull. Lacuna dropped from the sky into a heap on the dead, wet grass. Hoping she'd take a second to brag, I tried for Sats, assisted rifle shot, but she didn't slow after knocking Lacuna out, and instead dove for me once again. I saw her wide, murderous grin, her blue eyes wide in glee as her power hooves crackled. Worse, I realized why her strokes were striking with such precision. On her left foreleg was a pipbuck of her very own. Then a red-striped wall of steel hopped in front of me, and Psycho-Shy slammed all four hooves into Rampage's side. I heard ribs snapping like dry branches, but while Rampage grunted and bent a little, she didn't go down. "My turn," she hissed through her pain, and then she reared up and slammed her hoof claws into Psycho-Shy's face. 6 bloody furrows opened in the Pegasus's hide as she snapped her wings hard to get away. Rampage wasn't going to give her the chance, though. She leapt and landed on top of Psycho-Shy like a falling house. The yellow Pegasus screamed as those claws dug into her shoulders and haunches. "Well, too bad I don't have a wood chipper. But," she grinned ear to ear, "make a wish." "Rampage!" I shouted, stopping her from tearing the yellow pony to pieces. Something was wrong with this. I slowly approached while Glory and Scotch worked to revive Lacuna. Psycho-Shy's eyes were wide and terrified. Slowly I walked in front of her and she gave a sniff. "Hey, Psycho-Shy." She began, then flinched away when she saw my face. "You have to help him. You have to give him the program. Please." "He's tried force, bribery, and coercion, and now he sends you to beg for him?" I asked as I took a seat. "He didn't send me." She tried to heave Rampage off her, but my friend wasn't budging. "They're going to kill him." "Funny. I'm going to kill him," I said, smiling slowly. "Sounds like he's fucked." She sniffed as she looked up at me. "You have to save him. You have to. Some pony has to," she said as she struggled again. "Give me the program," she screamed in mad desperation, her hoofs clawing at me. "Girl, you have a completely smashed your apple," I said with a touch of astonishment. "You really think, after everything he's done, not to mention you, that I'm going to just save him?" She looked up at me and nodded, and then, like that, the amusement was torn away, and I shouted at her. "He threw a whole settlement of miners into a rock crusher, and left the last one alive to tell me where he was going next. He marched a town into a radioactive crater and watched them die. He sent Deus to my stable, and I don't even want to imagine what he may have done that I haven't heard about yet." She finally went limp, sobbing as she hid her face in her hooves. "I know, but he's all I have. Nobody else is going to save him, so I have to." She sobbed brokenly as she lay there in the mud. I stared down, and P-21 emerged from the rain to sit beside me. "You can't seriously be considering this, Blackjack," he said quietly. I couldn't answer him. It wasn't sane, and we both knew it. "This is the pony responsible for making our lives a living hell. That fucker exposed 99 to that damned virus. You promised dusty trails," he shouted. I know! I shouted back, making him balk. I knew that Sanguine was a monster, a complete fiend who deserved to die. I knew it. But I never imagined having a pony beg for the life of such a creature. And that introduced the insidious thought in my head. Could forgiving Sanguine actually be better? I had a very similar yellow Pegasus in my mind begging me to do just that. Please, he's all I have, she whimpered. If he doesn't get that program, he'll kill everyone in chapel, and then Vermilion will kill him. Or something worse than the Corps will. Or you will. I sighed and ignored P21's glare. Who is he, Psycho Shy? Why should I give a monster like him? Who is he to you? She trembled as she closed her eyes. My mama was killed by raiders when I was still in the womb. He cut me out, used his machetes and machines to keep me alive. He raised me, named me, taught me how to read, made sure I was better and stronger than any pony, she said, giving a little heave against Rampage without result. And you two are, intimate? Glory asked, tapping her hooves together awkwardly. All of us stared at her for a moment. Then she blurted, That's what Mallet said! What? No, that's disgusting! Psycho Shy said in disbelief. Rampage blinked in surprise. Seriously? You're not riding his jerky stick. The yellow Pegasus went bright red, looking away. Oh, so you want to? He's the only pony who's ever been nice to me, she murmured as she closed her eyes. But he calls me his little filly. I sighed as I looked at Rampage. Why wasn't anything ever easy? Well, Dr. Rampage. Well, she, I think, is batshit crazy, Rampage said softly, then looked right at me. You, however, have a nasty case of bleeding heart. Worst case in the wasteland. You just can't kill a pony in cold blood, can you? You can kill just fine if some pony's shooting at you, but the second you have to face the thought of deliberately killing some pony, then your guts get all squirmy. I'm not an executioner, I muttered. I thought of Brimstone's fall, of Flank, of 99. So many ponies deserving revenge. If you can't do it, let us, P21 said softly. Yeah, P21 and I can make a game of it, Rampage said with a chuckle. Psycho Shy sobbed foolishly beneath her. I sighed. P21 groaned and covered his face. Not the frickin' sigh. I know that sigh. That's the you don't want to kill some pony who doesn't deserve it sigh. I smiled a teeny bit, then looked down at Psycho Shy. I'm sorry, Psycho Shy. I can't make any promises to spare him. Not after what he's done. Especially after Brimstone's fall and what he did to Dusty. I'm sorry. Psycho Shy sniffed and sobbed wretchedly, pressing her face into the mud. Rampage rolled her eyes. I'm guessing you don't want me to accidentally sneeze and tear her in two. I shook my head and she groaned. Softest damn heart in the wasteland. You can push a button or pull a plug, but face to face, good and ugly. I'm not an executioner, I repeated softly, and looked down at Psycho Shy. Wonder glue her wings to a tree. She'll work herself free eventually. She glared up at me with a teary sniff. Then she'll come after me. And next time, Rampage will get her wish. But I'm sorry. I can't promise you that. Rampage got off of her roughly, bit one of her wings, and dragged her off to the trees beside the manor, while Acuna took off her power hooves. She screamed over and over again about how she was going to kill me before Lacuna silenced her with a mouthful of her own yellow feathers. P21 just looked at me and looked out at Chapel. Don't look at me like that. I know I'm an idiot for sparing her. I don't think you're an idiot, he lied, But then our eyes met and he sighed himself, rolling his eyes and said with a half smile,
Okay, you're an idiot. But you're an admirable idiot.
I just hope that no pony dies because you keep giving ponies second chances. I smiled too and looked at Chapel. Hours ago I'd been so sure. Now I was fighting myself and closed my eyes, remembering the promise I made to Dusty and all the other ponies who were owed some revenge. Thinking of all the ponies who were in danger. For the longest time I'd wanted some pony, the dealer, the little mares in my imagination, the stars themselves, to give me a nudge one way or the other. Nothing. This was my call. I thought of a little figurine in my saddlebags, the mare smiling in the atrium of the Fluttershy Clinic, the mare to a mother so long ago. Sorry. Sanguine would have to die. We looked down at the town from the road. So, let me guess. You just trot right down there and then we make it up as we go? Glory asked with a half smile.
I love this plan,
Rampage said, stomping her hooves in glee. No, I wasn't going to have another fallen arch. Not here. First, P21 and I are going to go down there and get a good look at the place. I do not want a bloodbath. I dug into my bags and took out the first of the tricks I'd purchased in flank. A brand new stealth buck. Sit tight. We'll be back soon. Okay, I said as I extended a finger and started to draw on the dirt behind the wagon. The stealth bucks had lasted long enough to get me in and out. Once we'd gotten back, the blue buck had been wearing an undeniably smug look on his face. Here's the situation. We got an hour or so, tops, before things start getting ugly. They've noticed Sunshine here is missing and think we're coming soon. I glanced over at Psycho-Shy. Sanguine's trying to get the Vermilion, the Griffin in charge, to send the other flyers to check the road. Vermilion just wants to dust the whole town. I really want to hit them before they come for us. Do we have a plan? Glory asked with a smile. We actually do. I drew a snaking path in the dirt, then drew squares at the approximate locations of the buildings. 2 snipers are hidden in the chapel's bell tower, I said, putting down 2 bottle caps in the appropriate spot. No pony could hide from the EFS. Well, okay, they could, but these 2 hadn't. They're ponies, so they're all yours, Lacuna. Zap them, use mind control, drop a boat on them, whatever. The purple Alacord nodded. I will endeavor to neutralize them appropriately. I put down a bottle cap outside of chapel, in Sakashi's house, and in the post office. Here are the positions of 3 monster ponies. The dragon pony's here. I touched the first. Then, the exploding one. I touched the second. And the manticore. I pointed to the third. She's got 3 more of her pets in there. I looked at Glory. The manticores are all yours. Keep strafing them. If they hide or run, fine. If not, do what you have to do. Right, she said with a little nod. Scotch tape was divested Psycho-Shy of Marmalade's pip-buck and placed it on Glory's hoof. She was still occasionally trying to reach out and touch the EFS bars in her vision. P21 is going to neutralize Fury and then join me at the chapel. He nodded once, not looking happy.
And the dragon monster pony's mine, right?
Rampage said in glee and started dancing.
I get to fight a dragon. I get to fight a dragon.
Her name is Precious, Scotch said firmly, and smiled. Time to burst Rampage's bubble. Nope, I said, and immediately she sat down hard and glared at me. I put 4 bottle caps down in one of the smaller residences. There are 2 griffins and 2 ponies in here. I sighed and smiled. Do what you do best. Inside the chapel, I put down 4 bottle caps. 2 more ponies in here, along with Vermilion and Sanguine. P21 and I will handle that. When you've taken care of your targets, meet us here. They have most of the children in this corner. I put a sparkle cola there and looked at Lacuna. I would be really happy if you could get in there and keep a shield for as long as you can. Scotch frowned and then chewed her lip nervously. You didn't say what I'm doing. Please, I really want to help. Don't leave me behind again. I smiled at her. Don't worry, Scotch. Not this time. I assured her, then took out a little tin of mints. You get the most important job. The streets of Chapel stood silent and empty, looking abandoned to any pony who didn't notice the occasional pair of eyes peeking out into the street through the boarded-up windows. A pair of beam rifles poking out of the ditzy night from the bell tower, panning back and forth. Outside the large white building sat a very dejected-looking filly. At first glance, she was simply a purple unicorn filly with a slightly odd-looking green mane. Then you saw her spade-tipped reptilian tail, her clawed limbs, and that her mane was in fact a row of green spines. Then there was a shimmer, and an olive filly appeared at the corner of the building. She gave a perfect warm smile and gestured for the dragon pony to come closer. The suspicious filly stepped towards the corner, and my heart in my chest as I watched. I had the bit in my teeth, but then the pair disappeared around the corner with no signs of violence. Slowly, I let out my breath. One cap down. I looked up at the rifles, then further up at Lacuna flying over the bell tower as silently as a purple ghost. There was a bright purple flash with a twin above the river, and the 3 bars vanished from my EFS. 2 more caps down. But that flash wasn't inconspicuous. I moved over to the door to the building the Griffin Mercs were behind and set an empty Sparkle Cola bottle up right beside it. From out in the rain came a clattering of hooves on asphalt. I looked at the door to the house, waiting. Then I knocked hard on it. The door creaked open and a metal-covered head peeked out. Huh? He had just a second to do the right thing. Instead, he stood there gaping at the glittering form charging him. "Reapers!" she screamed as she slammed into him like an armored freight train. Me on Stampede had been ugly. Rampage on the stuff? Well, at least she was happy. At the racket, the Manticore mare, Brass, stepped out of the post office just in time to receive a blinding burst of green Gatling beam fire to her face as Glory stepped into view. The monster pony ducked back, but the next Manticore that tried to leave the post office exploded in crackling light and collapsed into a heap of emerald dust. Fury raced out of her building and at once started to run towards Glory, but as she charged, there was a poof from the gap between the houses. A metal dart appeared in her flank. She started to glow in shock, then dimmed, took a staggering step, and fell over on her side as the solution of Fixer and Moondust filled her veins. I turned back towards the door to Chapel. 2 bucks in combat armor, one floating a sniper rifle, and the other 2 marksman carbines on his battle saddle, were stepping out and taking aim at Glory. I suppose that a mare appearing right in front of you was more than a little bit of cheating. Appearing and using sats to blast your face with explosive rounds was a lot of cheating. To the Unicorn Stallion's credit, though, it still wasn't enough to take him down. He staggered to the side, injecting himself immediately with Stampede and a healing potion as he fired the rifle at me point blank. One downside of being able to feel my cybernetic parts was that it really hurt when that round punched clean through a forelimb. The other Merc mare raced to my side and strafed me. I drank a healing potion, but the process was horribly slow. I just had to grit my teeth and turned and fired both rifle and shotgun blast as the Earth Pony mare. She kept pouring on fire, definitely not going down easily. Then a little apple with a green band arced out of the darkness behind her and landed on her hooves. She leapt aside at once and was midair when the green magical grenade went off with a green sphere of energy. The magic transformed her into so much green sludge splashing across the cracked pavement. Unfortunately, I'd taken my eyes off the sniper unicorn, and he reminded me of his presence by putting a round into my chest. My EFS lit up with a flashing of warnings and diagrams telling me how badly I was injured, and the burning pain was another clue that even I couldn't miss. I looked at him, seeing right down the barrel of the gun and knowing he'd put the next round through my brain. There was a resounding clank, and fragments of wet, rusty metal flew past me as a dark hunk landed atop the sniper. It rocked twice, and I gaped at the rusty keel. Lacuna landed neatly atop the hulk, and thought simply, I found a boat. One of the griffins leapt out of the window of the House of Rampage. He whirled, firing wildly a pair of multi-directional bolt guns that rained destructive magic in a cone of annihilation, sweeping towards P-21, Lacuna, and myself. Like a rain of destructive death, the bolts, any one of which could have turned us into matching pink slime, began to strike us. Lacuna's shield spell was immediately rocked by the onslaught. Then the griffin opened his eyes wide as green magic crept over his body. He glanced back, his face twisting to one brief moment of agony and then collapsed into a glowing pile of dust. Unfortunately, turning her gun on the griffin meant that Glory had given an opening to Brass. Like a thunderbolt, she launched herself out of the double doors of the post office and into the sky. "Fuck this!" she screamed as she dove, scooping up the unconscious Fury in her hoofs, claws, and started climbing, flying north as fast as her scorched wings could carry her. "Hey, get back here!" Glory yelled after her. "We'll turn you into a Reaper yet," Rampage murmured as she limped out. She had an entire foreleg missing. The pink light was creeping out of her shoulder as the limb slowly regenerated before our eyes. Glory flushed, not entirely convinced that would be a good thing. Then a voice croaked out from the chapel. "Well then, time to finish this little drama of ours." I winced, watching the red bar, a damage bar, slowly creeping towards the stable conditions, and this was going to take a while. I looked around, spotted some tin cans, smashed them under hoof, and popped them to my mouth. The rusty metal had the consistency of paste and didn't taste much better. 3 more cans and some scrap metal later, though, and I was getting into the yellow territory. "Blackjack, are you going to be able to take care of him?" P-21 asked in concern. I looked at him and smirked. "If he takes a hostage, he's one dead ghoul." There was just the issue of saving his hostage. "Only blackjack, please," called Sanguine. "You're crazy if you think—" Rampage began. Then there was a gunshot, and the Crusaders inside began to yell and shout as a filly cried out in pain. I looked at Lacuna. "Get Glory and P-21 to the bell tower, and teleport in once I have them distracted. Rampage, he doesn't leave out this door. Got it?" Every pony nodded. I took a deep breath. My injuries were mostly regenerated. Slowly, I walked into chapel. The pews were all smashed and stacked in a pen or a barricade that had most of the Crusaders inside. I was afraid they might have been moved or mixed up when the attack started, but they were mostly together. Harpka, the ghoul Pegasus, was softly humming to keep them all as calm as possible. Sakashi sat bleeding in the corner, cradling Magina. Some pony had worked her over good the last hour. There were, however, 3 who were not penned up. Priest, Sonata, and a bleeding Charity. The yellow filly clenched her stomach as Sonata tried to staunch the bleeding with her hooves. "So glad to see you again," Sanguine said from behind Priest. The boiled-looking ghoul watched me over, Priest's black back, with a half-lidded gaze and a smile. A glowing revolver appeared, freshly reloaded from his saddlebags, and then he nodded over to the pen where the glowing grenade hovered over the collection of children. "I really do apologize for all this. I really would have rather settled this some other way." Then he paused. "Is Fluttershy still alive?" "We didn't shoot her in the gut, if that's what you mean," I replied. Sanguine had the audacity to look relieved at that.
Yes. Good. Well, lose the weapons, and I will heal her.
This is taking too much time, growled a dark form looming in the corner opposite the pen. A big, dark something. Vermilion was one of the most impressive griffins I'd ever seen, and on top of that, I wasn't entirely sure what was armor and what was his augmentation. His black armor was edged in stylish red that matched his dark red wings. The glowing eyes in his helmet narrowed slightly.
Just kill her.
I've wasted enough time with this shit. Shut up, Vermilion, Sanguine snapped, pink vapor trickling out his nostrils.
Security has taken out Deus and the Steel Ranger's battleship. She is ridiculously dangerous, but she also doesn't want to risk her filly friend here bleeding out.
Don't count on that, asshole,
Charity hissed, despite her agony.
Blackjack owes me a ton of caps. She doesn't have to pay me if I'm dead.
Shut up, Charity. I'd much rather pay you back. Please. You don't have to involve the children. I'm hostage enough for you, Priest said calmly.
Yeah, you're a martyr waiting to happen,
Sanguine said, then looked at little Sonata.
But there are advantages of having pairs.
The glowing gun whirled and pressed itself to the side of the little filly's head. There was a click as the hammer was drawn back.
Okay,
I shouted. His eyes were narrow and desperate. Slowly, I began to remove the battle saddle.
I didn't want it to be this way. I wanted things simple. I wanted them simple,
he shouted as he stamped the gun to Sonata's head. The weapon was shaking as his focus wavered, and I could imagine it going off by accident.
Red-Eye needs male alicorns to keep the goddess in line. I can make male alicorns, or fuse a unicorn and Pegasus together and make one convincing enough for her. I can make myself useful to him, get him the materials he needs. But the one single thing I'm missing is the key to Chimera.
So, you found out where EC-1101 was, and found the painkiller-addicted Deus to send after it, I said as I carefully shed the weapons and tossed them back out behind me. I lost the guns. Now heal her.
In a second,
he replied as he kept the gun pressed to Sonata's head.
EC-1101 was all I needed. Simple, really. But then, you had to go and fire a mega spell at Merrimere. Do you have any clue how many alarms and sensors you set off all across the hoof when you fired the thing? And sure enough, you woke up that thing in the core, and now it's taking over one system after the next.
Sanguine,
you're rambling,
Vermilion said in contempt as he looked at the ghoul. I had a suspicion that Sanguine was deadlier either way. And now this murder spree? All to get my attention, I scowled.
You left me no other choice, he snapped. I tried forced, bribery, and letting Fluttershy fight you for it. I even offered to restore your body to normal. In the names of the sweet Celestia and Luna, why the fuck didn't you just give it up?
He yelled in complete exasperation.
I've been forced to cartoonish levels of monsterdom, simply to get what I needed.
Priest carefully lowered his horn and started to heal the wound on Charity's gut as Sanguine raved. The ghoul spotted the glow, however, and shoved his head back.
Next time you try that spell, you can see how well it works with a head wound.
I wanted answers, and to splatter his head across the wall. But Charity didn't have a lot of time left. I tossed my weapons all the way out the door, then my saddlebags too. I hissed in frustration. I disarmed. Now heal her!
Give me the program!
He snapped. Heal her first, then I will, I countered. The filly clenched both her eyes and jaw in pain. Sanguine looked half mad as his eyes darted between Vermilion and myself.
To hell with this,
Vermilion muttered. A missile launcher popped out of the back of his power armor and fired straight at the pen. Then, Lacuna, with impeccable timing, appeared in a glorious flash of purple light and raised a shield. The missile exploded against it. She turned her head to the floating grenade, and her own glow subsumed the light surrounding it. There was a thump, and Persuasion's projectile arced down from the narrow stairs to the bell tower and exploded in Vermilion's face. Green bolts racked the Griffin as he dodged to the side and readied another missile. At once, Priest's white glow surrounded the revolver against Sonata's head and sent the weapon flying as he turned and slammed Sanguine against the back wall. "You will not lay another hoof on another." But Sanguine simply drew another breath and blew a bright and colorful plume of pink vapor over Priest's face. On contact, the black unicorn's flesh seemed to turn runny. He didn't cry out. He just jerked and spasmed, then collapsed. I stared in horror at Priest's boiled, melted face. A pair of Vermilion's missiles blasted up, and only by jumping and falling to the floor were P-21 and Glory able to get clear of the explosions, as they blew the upper corner of the building apart. The delicate stained glass windows shattered into clouds of shards, and the paintings of the ministry mayors split apart as the entire front of the building peeled away into the street. Heavy timbers fell upon Glory, pinning her. There was a flicker as Lacuna pushed the grenade through the shield, pulled the pin, and lobbed it at Vermilion. The armored Griffin leapt out into the street. I charged at Sanguine as Priest fell to the side, and the ghoul threw Sonata at me. "Priest! Priest!" P-21 screamed as he scrambled across towards the fallen stallion. Glory was still trying to work her way free. Sanguine bit down on Charity's mane and hauled the bleeding filly out through the hole. I set the sobbing Sonata aside and curled up beside Priest. I looked back at Glory. "Go! Get her!" she cried, struggling to get herself free. Outside, Rampage was tearing into the armored Griffin, who was tearing back and trying to shake off the mare. I spotted Sanguine making for the bridge, followed by the injured filly. I raced after them, closing the gap. Finally, he turned, clutching the bleeding and battered Charity. "Give me the fucking program!" he shouted as he backed away towards the edge. "Don't give him shit!" Charity countered, struggling weakly. "He doesn't deserve it!" "Shut up, Charity!" I said, my eyes darting from him to her and back again. I stared at her and heard Citrine's voice. "How many have died for this?" I jumped into Sats to think. No weapon, no healing potion. She was bleeding out, but Sanguine was here, right in front of me. I knew his purple breath trick. I could beat him and smash him back and let the city defenses turn him to ash. I'd promised Dusty and Caprice. I owed so many ponies his head. All it would cost me was Charity's life. I stared at her, at the blood streaking her yellow stomach. I wanted to talk to some pony, any pony. Talk me into this. Convince me that I should kill him and get her to safety. "Your life isn't that easy, Blackjack," the dealer rasped softly as he trotted into that still scene. He looked at the filly and the ghoul with equal dispassion. "Looks like you have two choices. Kill him, let her die, keep the program. Give up the program, she lives. Decisions, decisions." I wanted to smack that smug smile he wore off his face. "Don't mock me with the choice. Tell me the better thing to do." He pushed his wide-brim hat back and smirked at me. "Well, look at it this way. You give up the program, you can always take it back. You know a way to bring her back if she dies." He said with a smile. I mentally groaned and he laughed at me. "Oh, and if you're trying to think of a third option, don't bother. You're not clever enough for that. So, is keeping EC 1101 worth the filly's life?" I slipped out of Sats as the dealer vanished again. Shit. Security saves ponies. "Here!" I said as I lifted my leg and opened the panel hiding the pip-buck screen. His eyes widened, and from his saddlebags emerged a ripper. The chain whirled as I grit my teeth. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing me scream. A few surprisingly careful passes of the weapon later, he tore out the delta, leaving me with an ugly new cavity in my leg and making my EFS vanish. He stared at it. Finally. I can finally save them. I can heal her! I yelled, as I pointed at Charity, the lightning flashing overhead. His lips curled into amusement.
Heal her? Why would I do that?
He said as he tucked the delta into his bag.
Better get her to your alicorn friend quickly and not waste time with me.
Fucker! I shouted, but he was right about Charity. I grabbed her and put her across my shoulders, then turned and raced back through the rain towards chapel. The hole in my left leg made some unpleasant noises and twinges of pain, but the limb held. As I ran into town, I saw a dark shape overhead. Vermilion was airborne, but he was winging his way towards the southeast. You shouldn't have given it up. Bad trade, Charity muttered weakly in my ear. Shut up and don't die, you hear me? I shouted as I scrambled into the blasted church. Lacuna was seeing to the injured, but winged over and immediately pressed her horn to Charity's belly when she saw us, using her magic to heal the injury. Glory knelt beside Priest, who breathed slow, laborious breaths through a tube inserted into his throat through his neck. His entire head was a smooth pink bullet. His eyes, nose, and mouth had melted closed from the pink vapor. Did you kill him? P21 said with a shaky voice. No. I had to bring Charity back before she bled out, I muttered softly. Of course you did, P21 said with a sniff. That's what you do. You save ponies. I looked at Priest, and his sides moving slowly. Can we do anything? I asked Glory. The gray Pegasus looked at me and shook her head slowly. We can't even move him, she whispered in horror. Then I looked at where she was pointing and gasped. The melted flesh had somehow fused with the floors beneath him. P21 made a choking sound. Well, I'm glad you didn't kill him, Blackjack. I'm glad, because when I find him, he's going to wish that it was you he was facing. I'm going to get creative when I get to him. You hear me? I'm gonna... I touched him, knowing what it was like to be ready to explode. We want to lash out at the world. Rampage had said it. We're all victims of the wasteland. All of us. He tensed under my touch, so rigid I thought he'd shatter. I understand, I said sincerely, remembering Mom's head on a stick. He gave one broken sob, then another, and another. And like all his hard anger softened to tears as he curled against me. I held him in my embrace. Not again. Not again, he whispered softly between sobs. No, not again. This time, you have friends with you, I said quietly. He nodded and pulled away. Glory trotted closer to him and gave a little smile. She wanted to help. She knew what it was like too. And she touched P21's shoulder. For the longest time he sat there, and then he slowly turned into her embrace as well. Priest coughed. Even with the tube, he couldn't last much longer. Slowly, I knelt down and spoke softly into the hole beneath the melted nub of his ear. You saved a Priest. You saved Sonata. They're going to be okay. I brushed his white mane gently, closing my eyes. They said I died. Maybe I did. I can't remember for sure. But I think that Celestia and Luna are waiting for you. Just follow the music. I couldn't tell for sure, but I hoped his boiled lips curled a smile. His chest rose, fell, rose, fell, rose, fell. And that was it. Priest was off on his own final pilgrimage. I hoped he'd find his way. It was getting late. We dug the grave next to Thorn and Roses. Rampage had watched from afar, still as a statue as Lacuna lowered him into the ground. I didn't want to imagine how Glory had freed him from the floor of the broken building. We found a sheet to wrap him. Scotch had rejoined us, a bemused-looking dragon filly sitting next to her. I tried to think of something to say, but no matter how hard I tried, I kept coming back to one fact. Sanguine had won. He'd gotten EC 1101 from me after so many had suffered and died. He had my pip-buck, and I now had an empty hoof. Every step was a little reminder it was gone. But right now, even with my fears, EC 1101 was nothing compared to the loss of Priest. It wasn't over, though. Not at all. I'd almost taken off after him then and there, but the thought of coming across him with Brass and Fury, and maybe Vermilion too, didn't sit well with me. Not even I was stupid enough to run into those odds unprepared. I'd track him down, though. He couldn't escape us. Scotch tape had my pip-buck tag. Blackjack? Glory murmured, and I turned to look at her. I found some music back at the mine when I was searching Dusty's room. I was thinking, could I play it? He was a nice pony. I swallowed, then nodded once. Sure. Go ahead. She nodded and fiddled with her pip-buck, and a moment later a guitar began to play slow and simple notes. For once, it seemed, even the hoof gave a little reprieve as the cold rain slacked off. Then a buck began to sing in a soft, rusty voice. Some roads are straight and narrow, some paths are high and steep. Some ways are slow and heavy, some tracks are dark and deep. But this trail is one I follow, no matter where it leads. And I know I'll never wander as long as I heed. No matter where or how far it goes, I'll walk it without fail, because I know that no matter what, I will lay my burdens down at the end of the trail. My load is mine to carry along, I pack it all myself. I choose what I leave behind on that old and dusty shelf, and through memories follow my trail. I'll pay them not to care. My troubles are all my own, my treasures I will share. No matter how sore my hooves, I know that I'll go on. So though I am weary, I will continue along. Because no journey lasts forever, there's no end to this tale, and I will lay my sorrow down at the end of the trail. Though rocks may trip and slow me, though rain may lash my mane, though love may call out to me, though pain may cause me shame, though mud may prog my passage, though snow may chill me through, though dust and wind may blind me, there's one thing I must do. I look ahead and find myself at the journey's end. And finally I see both family and friend. And to those that still walk along, please don't weep and wail, for I have laid my troubles down at the end of the trail. Yes, to those who still love me, please don't weep and wail. I'll be waiting for you when you're through at the end of the trail. There wasn't much else to say. Past that, as the last of the music faded. Not much at all. And as we moved to fill the grave, Charity came back. The yellow pony kept her eyes down as she carried something on her back. Blackjack? Huh? I couldn't manage more than that right now. I looked at the green outlined towers of the core. Welcome home, Blackjack, they seemed to be saying. I know you didn't want to give that thing up. And I know if you'd let me die, you probably would have gotten revenge and stuff. Very closed her eyes as she pulled off a bundle the size of a sparkle cola bottle. I found it in the manor, and I just... Here. And she shoved it into my hooves, then turned and trotted over to where Sonata was being comforted by Allegro and Adagio and Medley. I slowly unwrapped the dirty cloth in my hooves. It was the wrong shape for a bottle of soda, or wild Pegasus. Then a flash of purple and white met my eyes. The cloth fell away, and I looked at the startling figurine. A white unicorn mare with a stunning purple mane and 3 gems for a cutie mark. I stared at her in shock, and then looked down at the little plaque at the base. Be unwavering. I stared at it, and sighed softly, closing my eyes and holding it to my chest, so that I could feel it. I'm trying, Rarity. I'm trying. Footnote. Maximum level reached.